Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to this historic Pauper Primer
Whoa.
for this, whoa, for this FNM at Home historic Pauper event. I'm Dan, and I have, as always, and the guy who'll be going through deck lists with me, the disembodied voice of Max. We're both disembodied now.
We are. There is no body.
Hey, nobody.
No body. Nobody but you.
Nobody. Nobody.
So, usually, if you've followed us on these Pauper Primers, A, thanks. And B, we would normally go through the pool of cards, because there's usually about, somewhere around a dozen cards maybe we want to go over.
Yeah.
And this time, Jumpstart has happened, and I've identified somewhere in the wheelhouse of about 4 dozen cards that could have Pauper implications for this particular run of historic Pauper, especially because there's just more robust options with historic Pauper. I like the historic Pauper a lot more than the standard Pauper just because of the size of the pool, and that's the thing I like about good old Pauper. Because there's just this very large swath of options. And historic Pauper is like that. So we're going to eschew the normal format, and we're just going to go through what I think are some decks you are going to see out there as you're battling. So the first one I'm going to do is one that didn't really get a whole lot from Jumpstart, and that is blue-green Ancestral Mask. So there is...
We used to call this Bant Pants back in the day.
Bant
Pants. It
Pants.
required Bant.
Yes. Yeah. And now it's just kind of Simic shorts, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, got on my Simic shorts.
Got on my Simic shorts, and we're doing battle. So this is my version of the list. There's a lot of flexibility in these lists, I think. What I think we got in the way of new cards is nothing from Jumpstart, but I think we did get 2 pretty good cards from M21. I think we got Ranger's Guile, which this is kind of your flex slot. It's either this or Starlit Mantle is your hexproof option of choice.
Ranger's Guile theme goes with everything.
It's just very good. It's very cheap. And the thing that leaned me towards it is I was playing Dive Down, again, over the Starlit Mantle, because half the cost is attractive to me.
Yeah.
But the thing that really attracted me to that is I got to play more green sources and cut down on my blue sources.
That feels pretty good.
Yeah, the only things in this deck that are blue are Omen of the Sea, which obviously pairs nicely with Ancestral Mask, one with the Wind as a nice piece of evasion, and another M21 card, Rousing Reed. So this card lets you draw more cards and then get +1/+1 flying. You're usually going to be holding a dead card or 2 in your hand in these kind of decks, so being able to Rousing Reed for just like a spare land feels great.
Yeah. And I think that lets you keep your curve pretty low, too.
Yes, I have Llanowar Elves, Ranger's Guile, and Ginger Brute on the 1-drop. On the 2-drop, I have Omen, One with the Wind, Elvish Visionary, Setessan Training, and Talons of Wildwood. On the 3, 4 Pioneer, 4 Mask, 3 Rousing Reed, and then the only 4 is 3 Jade Guardian.
Okay, yeah. Keeps the curve pretty low. Did you give any consideration to... oh, Christ, what's that? The 5-drop with hexproof from Ixalan?
Soul of the Rapids?
Soul of the Rapids, yeah.
Yes, but I didn't like the fact that he was double blue.
Uh-huh.
And I think we really only need 1 or 2 hexproof creatures really over the course of the game to go off. And I think your card selection is decent enough that you can do it. My version, you will sometimes have to just go in on an Elvish Visionary or a Ginger Brute with something on it. But that's not the worst thing in the world, because if I have a Ginger Brute with, for example, maybe a One with the Wind on it, I'm putting a clock on my opponent, and it's forcing them to use removal. Meanwhile, I'm using, like, Omen of the Sea or whatever to try to get to, or, maybe popping a Rousing Reed on there to try to find one of my hexproof creatures and really go off. I try to save the masks either for the turn I'm going to win, and especially if I'm holding a Ranger's Guile, sure, I'll attack with a Ginger Brute with something on it. That's fine. So I'll hold the mask generally for a hexproof creature or for holding the Ranger's Guile, but generally I only need to do that once in a game. So I don't think you need the extra long game, because I think that's going to slow you down. And I do think that this historic Pauper format is pretty darn fast.
Yeah.
So I think this is approximately the way I would want to build it. I don't mind plopping the Setessan Trainings all willy-nilly because they draw cards. So don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to Omen of the Sea. Whatever you have to do to kind of find your pieces and come up with a game plan. It's really just assessing the board state. But do be careful, and we'll get more into this in a bit, but there are some actually quite playable edicts now in this format. So be aware of that.
Yes, there are.
So that's, I think, the reason I highlight this is it's already existed in Historic Pauper. It's still very good and something you need to be keenly aware of if you're going to try to brew yourself or play one of these other decks. Be aware that when they start playing Island into Forest, they're probably playing a pretty good deck and not just something really out there.
Yeah, it's not just like a random thing.
Right. So the next thing I want to kind of jump into are the red decks. I think there's really predominantly one seem to be better than others. Luckily, Dan and I have had some time to do a little bit of testing around and kind of dove into the format a little bit. But there is this version of red I put together that did pretty well for us when we were testing. It is what I'm calling red spells. So the key card that ties the room together is Thermo Alchemist, which if you're not familiar with this card, it means you're not playing regular Pauper. This is an absolute staple of regular Pauper mono red burn, and for good reason. It taps to deal a damage to each opponent, then it untaps whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell. So all of a sudden your lightning bolt turns into a 5 damage spell when Thermo Alchemist is able to tap.
I mean, that seems pretty good.
It is such a low investment cost. 0-3 is actually pretty reasonable. He's a fine enough blocker if you're in a pinch. And he just makes your burn spells so good. Turning your shock into 4 damage, and it can be 2 damage to a creature, 2 damage to a player, is crazy. That is such an above rate deal in this format that I think Thermo Alchemist is a card that needs to be very much on your radar, either to tie your deck together or to stop your opponent's deck from working, because this card is a powerhouse.
Yeah.
And I've kind of put it into what I'm going to refer to as like the Kiln Fiend deck shell, where we're playing Kiln Fiend, we're playing Burning Prophet. We also got some really good M21 card, or not M21, Jumpstart cards. We got Hungry Flames. This card it was from Kaladesh originally, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it costs 3, it's an instant. It deals 3 damage to target creature and 2 damage to target player or planeswalker.
It used to be an uncommon.
Yeah, it was a downshift, and it's really good. It's not quite Searing Blaze good, but it's damn close. And for Historic Pauper on Arena, this card is awesome. It's so good. 3 damage is really where you want to be with creature damage, because there's a few butts, like the Thermo Alchemist, that are 3, and you want to be able to clean those creatures up, and Hungry Flames just does that while it deals damage. God forbid you have a Thermo Alchemist out, it's dealing 4 damage to a player and 3 damage to a creature. That's absurd.
Yes, everything you've just said is very true.
The other card we got was Pillar of Flame, which is an oldie but a goodie. It's a sorcery speed shock that adds an exile clause if it deals damage to a creature. So it's just essentially copies 5 through 8 of shock in our deck. But the exiling's not negligible, because there are a few creatures that can do graveyard shenanigans now. There's Cadaver Imp that got introduced into the format, and things like that the graveyard does matter to a small extent. I don't think we're going to run mainboard Graveyard Hate or anything, and this is a best of 1 format. But I do think that Pillar is just awesome. Again, with the Thermo, it's dealing 4 damage or 2-2 split. It's just very, very good overall. The other card that's pretty interesting, it's an Ikoria card, is Raking Claws. It gives a creature double strike till end of turn. It just works so well with your Burning Prophets. It works great with the Gitu Lava Runner. It just kind of out of nowhere can win you a game. And what's really cool about it is that you can cycle it if it's a dead card. You can just be like, get out of my way, and let's move.
In a format that doesn't have a ton of great card draw, the ability to cycle is insanely good.
Yes, this slot is very much a flex slot as well. If you wanted to play Thrill of Possibility, I don't think that's necessarily a bad choice. If you wanted to play Fling, I don't think that is necessarily a bad choice. I think this is better, because to me it feels like it does the same things Fling does, specifically because of the card Crash Through with Trample. Trample and Double Strike is bonkers. You're not living probably through a Kiln Fiend with Trample and Double Strike.
Yeah, nobody's blocking that and
Yeah.
surviving.
So I think Fling is just kind of a worse version of this card, where this feels like Fling with flexibility to me. I think Thrill is just a little too dirtily for these decks. You will definitely overdraw land. In this version, I'm running 18, two of which are cycling lands. But you're going to overdraw lands, there's no doubt. It just happens. The games you lose, you're like, if this wasn't a mountain, I would have won. And you're absolutely right. But I don't think that there's going to be enough of that going on that you're going to want to play Thrill of Possibility over Raking Claws.
Right.
So that is the red spells deck. We also have the red beats deck, which is similar, but this deck is looking to just put more pressure on the board specifically than it is to cast a lot of spells and get value that way. So we're playing Fanatical Firebrands and Weaselback Redcaps. Then on our 2, we're going into Borderland Marauders, which attack as a 3/2, Goblin Shortcutters to shut off blocks. We have Rimrock Knight, a couple Underworld Ragehound, Viashino Pyromancer, and then at our top end, 3 Boggart Brute and 3 Bloodrock Cyclops, which is a new boy from Jumpstart. He attacks each turn as able. He's a 3/3 for 3 with really cool art.
I like the really cool art, and you're exactly correct. It really does have really cool art.
And I don't know if this mix is right. It may be better just to play the Brute. The reason I'm going 3 and 3 is because I think the 3 butt on the Cyclops, putting it out of shock range, is important. And I think when you're evaluating a creature in this format, you want to evaluate the creature versus shock. So, for example, Goblin Shortcutter, it comes in and falters 1 creature. It can't block. So there's already value there. If they kill my Goblin Shortcutter, I still got something out of the deal. I ate a piece of removal and I stopped a blocker. That's a good deal for 1 magic card to give. Same with Rimrock Knight. I can pump a creature and then put it in as a 3/1. These are all very flexible creatures that do something, where if I just play Boggart Brute, pass, and they shock it, that's a big problem. I spent a whole turn to loot for my opponent to shoot something with a shock. That's rough. So
Not good.
Yeah, I don't like necessarily doing that, but if the Boggart Brute comes down unanswered, it's really hard to deal with in these decks because you've been applying so much board pressure, they don't have enough blockers to double block a menace creature.
Yep.
So then you get to use something like Run Amok, which we have 2 copies of, to kind of pump through for the last little bit of damage. This deck plays so much to the board, and your toughness matters so much that I play Run Amok in these decks over something like Raking Claws, even though it can't cycle. The +3/+3, I want to keep my creature on the board, is really important.
Other than the toughness issue, this deck looks like it plays a lot like the sort of like red decks that have been going around standard for a little while.
Yes.
It's just like play to the board, play aggro, but play your curve, and just eventually you kill them.
Yep, and I really want to get to 3 drops in this deck, so I am playing 18 mountains. I'm not playing any cycling lands with Forgotten Caves. I don't want the tap land here. I just want to make sure that I'm getting to my drops, and that's like 3 or 4 in order to double spell. Like play a Rimrock Knight and like that's over from an adventure and still Run Amok if I can, or activate a Weaselback Redcap. Something like that to tie up my mana. So I want the mana a little bit more in this deck. I think the spells deck is a little bit better, but I do think that the red spells or the red beats deck is something to keep an eye on for sure.
I like the beats.
So the next deck I'm going to do, I'll touch on MBC last because we've seen that before and I'm not 100% on it, but the deck I'm the most excited about is what I think is the first actual real playable tribal deck we've gotten in Arena Pauper at any point. I think Merfolk was the closest up until now. I think we've discussed it a bunch, Dan. It's not quite there. But I do think that we finally, because of Jumpstart, got a playable tribe, and that is zombies. And there's a couple cards that really tie the room together for me. Cemetery Recruitment. It returns a creature from your graveyard to your hand for 2. Not great. It's twice as expensive for a Raised Dead. However, if the card you return is a zombie, you draw a card. So that is a real big deal. Being able to get 2 zombies off 1 card is a very high rate. The only time we've gotten that before in Paupers was with the one that returns Pirates. And again, another tribe that's not quite there, despite the Cutlass being a selectable option. The other card that this gave us, one of, I guess, 2 of 3, is Ghoul Raiser. It is a 2/2 for 3. When it enters the battlefield, return a zombie at random from your graveyard to your hand.
Seems good.
It's real good, and I'm wrong. It's not 2 of 3, it's 2 of 4 that are good. So this card will just, at random, raise dead any zombie in your graveyard. And good news is we're playing good zombies. The worst zombie we're playing is arguably Walking Corpse or Liliana's Steward. And I'll still get one of those back for free off a Ghoul Raiser. That's no problem.
I'll take a free raise dead.
Yeah, it's really crazy stapled onto a zombie already. And the one of the other cards that ties this 2 of 4 plan together from Jumpstart is White of Precinct 6. Very hard to say. But
very good.
Not hard to understand why it's insane. It gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your opponent's graveyards. So we only have one opponent in this format. However, this card comes down as like a 4/4 or a 5/5 most of the time. Pauper's like limited. You're gonna win 90% of your games through interacting with the board and through creature combat. So being able to deal with creatures, and you're just throwing dudes sideways because you don't care, because you're getting them back all willy-nilly with Ghoul Raisers and Cemetery recruitments. So you're trading off your board in the very early game, hitting things with Dead Weight, hitting things with Grasp of Darkness, getting them out of your way. Your opponent's got 4 or 5 dudes in their yard. You just like casually go, I'm going to play a Plague White and then a White of Precinct 6. And so I'm just going to casually commit a 2/1 with an effect and a 5/5 to the board on my turn 5/6. It's just like your opponent's just like, yeah, so I don't win this game.
Yeah, guess not.
Yeah, and the white, if it dies, you just get it back with the aforementioned Ghoul Raiser or Cemetery recruitments. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. And I think the card that's going to win you some games, and this is the one I'm not sure on the numbers, I don't know if there should be a 3 of or a 4 of, is Gempalm Polluter, which is originally from Legions. And it is a 4/3 for 6, and it has cycling, which is the most important part, not just because you get to draw a card, but for black, you cycle it, and when you do, you have target player lose life equal to the number of zombies on the battlefield.
Card is broken. That whole cycle, the Gem Palms are great.
Yes, and the Goblin one is probably the most commonly played, which is the Incinerator. But this one is so crazy on a stalled board. It's good reasons to not attack if you don't have the ability to recur your guys. But just 3 or 4 zombies on the field, draw a card, deal 4 to your opponent, will have them lose 4 life, is crazy.
Uh-huh.
And if they're playing in the mirror, these become even more crazy. So be very cognizant of how good Gempalm Polluter is. Be very cognizant it is on the battlefield, not on your side of the battlefield.
That is definitely... I've been playing Historic Goblins, and I've definitely seen people screw that up in the mirror.
Yeah, no doubt. So the last deck that I wanted to look at is Mono Black Control. So
NBC.
Yeah, good old Mono Black Control. There is a lot of things to like here, and I'm not exactly sure the configuration, but I do think that there's a deck here. I'm still working on what the components are. So this one's kind of like under construction, but I do think there's enough here to look at. This deck is very classic, kind of like old school as it gets. And what we're trying to do is just run the opponent low on resources by making them discard cards or killing whatever they put on the board. And then what we're doing is we're winning with a larger creature than they can deal with or an ill-gotten inheritance. You've seen us go over this deck list many times throughout these Pauper videos. It's still here. It's still very playable. I just don't know what the exact configuration is. M21 gave us Grasp of Darkness in the format. -4/-4 for 2 is crazy good. You still have Tendrils to gain an actual million life.
Yeah, all those swamps, yeah.
You have Glass Gasp to give -3/-3 for 2. You have Innocent Blood to make each player sack a creature, which largely will just be them, or you'll lose a Dusk Legion Zealot or something after combat. Who cares? And one of the other cards we got out of Ikoria that I think is very good is Suffocating Fumes. So you can handle your Rats decks or your tiny little token decks or whatever. You just play this bad boy, and if it's not applicable in the matchup, you cycle it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing as the Raking Claw. It's just, this isn't good enough here. Let me just cycle this. Fantastic. So I think that this deck is pretty good. Right now I'm playing it at 22 land. I could maybe want to squeeze a 23rd in. I could really see that being the case. I've had to shave down some numbers. Again, I'm not 100% sure. I think I want 4 Foreboding Fruit, but I'm not 100% how I fit it in yet. So I have to fiddle. But I did add in Phyrexian Rager, so that's the reason I cut down on the fruits, because I have the Rager now to help the card flow going. But I have...
And also just to add a creature to the board, which is not nothing.
Right, a couple hits with a Phyrexian Rager is fine. Them, like, wasting a card on your Rager always feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because we can just get it back with a Witch's Cottage, no big deal. So that's kind of what I'm looking to do. I also added Underworld Charger in for another way to win. He can just keep coming back. And as a 5/5 attacker, that's pretty good. You don't really care about him blocking because you have 4,000 pieces of removal in here. So who cares? Blockers, I don't even know what those are. So that's kind of the decks that I have targeted right now out of the gate for Historic Pauper. So if you're looking for something to pick up and play for FNM, my personal choice is the zombie deck. It just looks cool as shit. But any of these decks are certainly playable and certainly worth a try. They're certainly not everything, so of course let us know in the comments what you're playing and how you did with it, because I'm always on the hunt for new spicy Pauper decks, because this format is sweet, and I'm super glad that we get it for the FNM here coming up. Dan and I just found out about it, so we wanted to jam a video together for you guys so you could kind of know what to play or have an idea of what to do, because we try to be on top of this Pauper, but... You know.
Yeah, I'll mostly just be playing red spells, but...
Hey, it's real good.
It's real good, and I love it.
Yeah,
so.
That's all I got. So hopefully, again, just let us know in the comments what you're playing, because I really do want to know.
Yeah, seriously. Bye, everybody.